Hey, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Zenatta Consulting's full product tutorial on Zoho WorkDrive. It's funny, Tyler, we have done so many of these, and this was one we kind of backburnered, but we had a lot of people asking about it. So I think it's...
we found ourselves using this application more and more recently as well. So we thought it'd be a good time to do it.
We do. You know, I think it's one of those things we pretty much have fully transitioned off of Google Drive onto WorkDrive now. And it's just the things you can do with it internally. And we're going to talk about that today and talk about where it fits. So we're going to start off with what's WorkDrive. For those of you that don't know, I promise I'll be brief because there's not a lot to it there. Then I'm going to dive into a full product overview. Tyler's going to take you through admin console and team folders. I'm going to talk about sharing documents, and then we're going to talk a little bit about some advanced features and things you can do, some fun stuff we've been doing lately for ourselves and for a lot of clients. And then we'll just do an open Q&A. So if you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the Q&A box there. If you just want to chat with us during the show with a quick thought or comment, just go ahead and drop it in the chat box. We'll be looking at that as well. Anyway, with that, let's get going. So we'll start with what is WorkDrive? Well, it is something that you've all used over and over again. It's basically an online file management platform for document storage and collaboration. Basically supports any document you would think of, whether it's Excel, Doc, PowerPoints. When you put them in, you can have it leave them in their original format or convert them to Zoho's format. And it will also, even if you leave them in the native format, it'll still open them, but it's going to open them in the Zoho format, just like everyone else does. It's part of Zoho One. It's part of Zoho Workplace, and it's also in the Zoho Remotely bundle. If you go to buy it on its own, it is extremely inexpensive. I don't know what the overall pricing is, but like $2-3. It's not a lot per user per month. And it's basically a replacement for Google Drive, Microsoft OneDrive, Dropbox, Box, any of those kind of file managements like you have that as well. All right. And we had a quick question here. WorkDrive and SharePoint documents, do they play well together?
OneDrive, I don't know if I've ever tried to tie it to SharePoint. Yeah, I don't know if I've ever tried to tie it to SharePoint in particular. Yeah. In terms of OneDrive versus the WorkDrive desktop app, we really like the WorkDrive desktop app if you're using the TrueSync version. Without going down a rabbit hole, there are two different ways to pull WorkDrive onto your desktop. One of them actually pulls all the files down and stores them locally. The other one is called TrueSync, and it pulls them down just with basically referencing them. So you can open them on a local PC, but they're not stored there until that point. So pretty solid on the desktop app end. But to be honest, I haven't used the OneDrive app in a very long time on a desktop.
Yeah, and I find all of them to be virtually the same at the end of the day. It's a place where you're storing files and sharing files and collaborating on files. So anyway, we can cover that a little bit more in the Q&A part, but thanks for asking that. So let's just dive into the product overview. So let me kind of take you through it. Basically, this is what you see when you come into your main WorkDrive screen. If there's some files that you are following or other things, they will show up here in unread, things that you need to look at. They're going to show up here. But basically, then if you go and you kind of click down to your recent files, you can see the things you've been working on recently. This is a demo account, so excuse what we've got in here. I've got this price list for internal use only. We're going to talk about sharing options a little later, and we'll talk about permalinks, and of course, download self-explanatory. But you've got the little more ellipse button through here that gives you kind of all the things you really can do with that document. Once you can basically do all these things once you've opened it up as well, but we're going to cover them right here. Standard ones, what do you want to open it with? So if you've installed some extensions, it's normally going to ask you to open it with the native Zoho applications. But if you've got other extensions installed, you can open it with other things as well. And then a preview is just a standard, going to bring up a quick preview without actually opening it. Properties does give you a little more. This is kind of interesting. It's going to bring you up to a page where you've got general info, versions, activity, and access stats. So general info, when it was created, when it was modified, is there a permalink, what type of file it is. Versions is really interesting because when you go into this, it's going to tell you that it's not going to give you the versions for this. You actually have to go ahead and open the file in Zoho Sheet and then go ahead and look at the versions. But we're going to talk about versions a little later because this exact same screen kind of changes. So you can get to this screen, but it will give you different things depending on how you access it. And so we'll talk about that. It's something WorkDrive team you might want to pay attention to. And then you've got just that, like I said, so if you do click on versions, then you're just going to go in, click on file, and you can go ahead and view the overall file version history, and it's going to tell you everything that happened to it. Then you can click on activity. This is when it was created, when it was viewed, what's happened. So if you're working on a long document, you want to see who's working on it, who's done what, if they viewed it, if they accessed it. Oftentimes, maybe you'll say to someone, hey, everybody, I want you to look at this document and give me your thoughts on it. And you ask your team, hey, what'd you think of it? It was great. And you go look at this and no one ever looked at it. So, this is a kind of place to fact check things like that. And also you get the overall access stats. So this is, how many views has it been looked at? How many times has it been downloaded? If you had a permalink, how many views came from them? And all of your links will actually show up here. So you can see the access for all of the different links that you set up. And we're going to go and dive into what those links look like a little bit down the road as well. You also can show the enclosing folder. This is kind of nice. This is only really going to be up here at the top where you're either in, recent folder files, favorites, things you've got labeled, those kind of things. Oftentimes you're looking at a long list, you're looking at a file and you're like, well, actually, what folder is that in? I don't know. So if you choose enclosing folder, it's just going to take you and let you know it's down here in the sales collateral folder. So basically it'll take you to that folder where that document lives. You can also from here get an embed code. So like a lot of the online document management programs that are out there, if you wish, you can actually take it and make this document live on a web page. So by getting the embed code, copy that, give it to your web developer, and then go ahead and embed that on your website. And it's kind of nice if you're looking for something. I see people do this for down and dirty price lists, things like that. Anybody can go in and make the changes. They're instantly going to show up. They don't have to have access to the website.
And one little interesting thing there with the embed code, and this could be its whole own video, so I'll just kind of toss it out there, is within applications like Zoho Writer, they can actually accept iframes. So if you had some type of, quote sheet that you had worked up for someone, you want to include it in a proposal in Writer, you could actually embed it this way directly into that document as an element. So it opens up some interesting things you can do with these documents in WorkDrive.
Yeah, very cool. And like you say, we could do a whole nother video on that. We probably should. That would be a good one. One of our tutorials that will drop out on this. And then of course you can get a new download link. So if you want to give someone just a specific link for this to download it, you can create the link, give it a name, set a limit, set an expiration date, those kind of things. So maybe you really just want to, it's got one download and it's going to expire tomorrow. This is quick. It's like, get this now. It's sensitive information. You can kind of control things that way as well. And also in here, it's kind of cool. If you're having a problem with any of the documents you're working on, you can quickly share it with Zoho support and with the WorkDrive team and basically make a comment. You can even give them their access level that they can have to look at the document and go ahead and share it with them. And then that way they can look at it and maybe understand the problem that you're having.
And this kind of part of Zoho's like bigger push around privacy is that even a member of their support team has no way to view any of these unless you actually explicitly let them. So you oftentimes be asked to do that if you do need any help making a formula work in a spreadsheet or you're having some type of issue.
Yeah, PowerPoint oftentimes too, maybe you're having formatting issues there. I find they're helpful with that as well. So nice little feature. And that again is just right in the same list. And of course, you've got the standard things where people can go ahead and add comments to the documents where you can put something in, we should have some more data in here. I think we probably should for on our sales spreadsheet. And additionally, you can check out a document. Now this is unique. So you've got a document, it's shared with people, you're the owner of it, and you basically decide you want to completely take it off. You don't want anybody to be able to touch it. So when you go ahead and check out a document, it can't be edited by any collaborators at all. And all the changes you make on it won't even be visible until you check it back in. Okay, now that shows up under the versioning aspect here. You'll notice this menu is the same as one we saw before. You can check out the versions by opening it here, but now this whole check out, check in option also appears under the versionings menu, but it's only going to get there if you actually go to it this way. So it's the only way to check out a document or check one back in. And then you can also have a follow on updates. So let's say you are not working on a document or you are doing some things, but you're waiting for other people and you want to be notified when somebody is actually working on the document or doing something to the document. You can go ahead and do that and get your notifications set up. You can have it set up with a bell, or it's just going to be, inside WorkDrive here, or email, or both. And once you start following it, when someone makes changes, and you're following it, basically it's going to give you a notification and you can go ahead and take a look and see what those changes are. You can also set this as a favorite. When you do so, it's going to show up here in your favorites file. That's kind of standard stuff across the board as well. And of course, then once you've set it as a favorite, you can then remove it as a favorite. Another thing that Zoho has is fairly nice is the ability to add labels, and you can customize these. So if you want to basically have kind of another way of tagging things, I guess, is the best way to look at this. And there's some metadata that we're going to talk about later on in a little more detail on what that looks like. But this is just a quick way to go ahead and apply a tag to something. And once you do apply a tag to something, such as internal document, you'll see it appears here, but we've got nothing here on the price list. Once you go ahead and apply the tag, then that's going to show up here as well. And you can sort by that and search by that. Just another way of kind of categorizing your documents. The rest of this is fairly straightforward. Copy to, rename, move to, and zip. I don't think we need to go into those detail. They're pretty straightforward. And then the last one, which is kind of nice, is if you're working on something, you also have the choice to save it as a template. And when you go ahead and save it as a template, it can be just one of your own private templates. You can save it to an org template. You choose where it's going to go, give the template a name, and away you go. So you've spent a lot of time working on a document. You've got it dialed in. You say, wow, this is great. We should be using this for everything. And you can go ahead and save it with a template, let your organization know. And then now moving down the left side here. Now, if we go into our favorites, you can see I favorited this price list. And so there it is. It's now moved into my favorites folder. Anything that I've given labels to will appear under the label folder as well. You can then have all of your own folders that you can set up. You can view the folders that are shared with you. And then you also have this thing called collect files. This is really kind of cool. This allows you to create a collection of files that you're basically sharing with someone. So you go through and you can have an internal collection or you can have an external collection. External collections are really, really, I think that's where this thing really shines, is the ability to create a folder, create a collection, share it externally. You get a lot that you can really drill down on here. So you've got this internal, and now we're going to look at external. You can give the collection a name, right? What do you want these internal users to see? Put all files here that we need to work with, any notes you want to have, where it's going to go. You can set a number, a limit. And by the way, request user data name. This is kind of interesting. So basically, I'll show you this in a minute, but when a user goes there, they have to put in their name. And so that way you can see who did those files, who did not. You can actually have them do name, phone, email, just to identify who's actually been coming into this shared folder and doing it. You can set a limit on size. You can set an expiration on this shared file, and probably most importantly, notify you when there's a submission. It's one of the big things with share folders that it's always been a problem. You share a folder with someone and they go ahead and upload it, and they don't even tell you that they've uploaded anything. You don't get a notification that anything's been uploaded. You maybe go down a meeting with them and you're like saying, hey, I really need that document. They're like, I put it there a week ago. This way you get that notification and you know that something's been shared and you can take a look at it. Once you're done, it gives you a nice little link, and you can go ahead and email that link out to anybody you want to. This is what that email gets when this is what the email looks like once you've sent it out. So it gives them, we've got this collection we're going to do. Here's your link. And when they open the link, it's like I said, you're basically going to have this little part where I requested their name. So they have to put their name in order to go ahead and access this folder, so you know who's there. And then they're in. And from there, they can go ahead and drag and drop their files, upload whatever they want, and you will get notified whenever a file has been added to that specific collection. And then we also have team folders. These are fairly self-explanatory. Tyler's going to go into them in a little more detail down the road, and we'll talk about what team folders are. And by the way, you can also click on the team folders heading, not the folder itself, and it will give you a lot of information on these team folders. So you can see who has access, how many people are there, when they were created, all of that kind of information. And with that, it brings us to the admin console. And Tyler, I will turn it over to you.
Sweet. So yeah, now that we've kind of walked through the initial overview of what all happens on that first kind of page and how to navigate around, we can walk through some of the admin settings. A lot of these are going to be pretty straightforward, so we'll try to be efficient here as we jump through them. So opening things up from that admin console, right, it'll first open us up to our dashboard. This is really just a top down, how many active members do I have? How many invites do I have out? Do I have any extra licenses available for this, right? So if you need to add a couple of users, you could come here and see, okay, I got to add, 2 more seats because I've only got 1 open. It's also going to give you a way to just get a quick view of how much storage you have available, where that storage is allocated, both by folder as well as by usage, and then some quick stats around file activity and kind of, what types of things are being interacted with in the system. Moving down the list here, you'll have your full list of members. Now, this is where there's a little bit of a branch. If you are on Zoho One and you go to invite a member, it's going to boot you over to the Zoho One interface to do that. If you're just on WorkDrive or you have it as kind of a standalone application, then you'll just be adding users directly through here. Again, here we've got our team folders. There's going to be a whole section on that. So we're just going to highlight here that this is another place to see them. You'll see team folders pop up a lot because they're kind of the primary way that you're going to organize things inside of WorkDrive. So this is just another place to go where you can see them, see how much storage they're using, and create new team folders as needed. Now, client users is a kind of interesting one with WorkDrive. There are a lot of cases where you are not going to need to have any client users to interact with people that aren't in your organization, right? So when Brett earlier is showing a collection being made and sent out to people, they do not need to be a client user to do that. If you give someone an external share link, even with edit permissions, they do not need to be a client user to do that. Client users are kind of a way to add someone as a user who would actually go into that main interface and interact with things in a more free and kind of open way, rather than them maybe saving a link and accessing it through that link later. I do want to highlight they're currently not supported for Workplace when it's part of a bundle. So for Zoho One, Workplace, and Remotely. But again, for all the things we've done, doing external links and collections, we've never had to use them. We've always found that honestly, it's a lot smoother and easier to give someone an external link with a password and have them access things that way and not have to, really worry about managing this other type of user.
Yeah, and that was one of the big issues for a long time with WorkDrive was the ability to share externally, especially, if you were in Zoho One, because really you had to actually have a user license. The external shares were just a mess at the end. They've just cleaned it up tremendously. And I think with collections, the sharing that they put in, you're right. We never really run into this anymore.
Next here on our admin panel is just a quick way to generate activity reports, right? So here we can basically say, show me activity by all members or by certain members within a given time period. And then we can limit down to see all the different types of activities that they might do. So, here we're going to run one with just all of the activities, but there are some specific ones that I want to highlight that you'd want to look at every now and then, right? Anything where documents or folders are being deleted, anything where sharing rules are being created or modified, right? So if you have that price list and it is, A1 importance that stays private, you want to make sure you're checking to make sure that, no one is sharing or kind of sneaking in any extra people who can see that list. Once we go ahead and generate that report, it's going to give you a quick breakdown of who did it, when did they do it, and what exactly did they do, as well as the IP address they did it from. Which can actually be pretty important if a lot of things are being deleted and you see that a user is doing it from an IP address that you don't recognize or that you don't normally see associated with that user, you might have a breach. That's kind of the reason that they include that identifier when you look at the activity report. Moving on, we have data templates. This is something that's pretty unique inside of WorkDrive. I don't know that I've seen this on a lot of the other file management tools. It's basically a way to create a little form or a couple fields, maybe I'll say, that you can assign to a particular document. These become really useful when you're trying to find documents later, because you might have a document you might have a set of documents related to a certain department that might be in a variety of different folders or a variety of different places based on who needs access to them. So if we were to go ahead and create a data template here, we'll just make a really simple one and we'll add a custom field. Now, of course, we've got a whole different set of fields to choose from here, from like open fields to type in, numbers, date and time, multiple choice. In this case, we're going to go with just a multiple choice and a dropdown. And we're just going to add one field to this data template for the department, right? So maybe we're storing sales, marketing, and accounting documents within this system. So now we've got this set up. You can add multiple fields here if you'd like. Just for the sake of the demo, I'm going to keep it simple and just have the one. And we'll come back and show how to actually add those onto some documents in just a little bit. Next here, you have a tab for data administration. This is kind of like a top-down way to search either within a particular team folder or within one of your private folders for some documents. So up here at the top, we have that little search bar. If I go ahead and type the name of a document or a keyword that I'm searching for, it's going to come up with any documents where that is contained. In this case, I searched across all team folders, but maybe you knew you had a couple different price lists and it was going to be somewhere in a particular folder. You might want to select that and be a little bit more specific. Next, we have another one that's kind of around security. So the ability to manage devices. So in this case here, we have our two users. If we open up one of our users, we can do two main things here. First, should we allow them to set up a desktop sync on one of their devices? That can be a really big deal, because if you're using the more traditional sync that's actually pulling down all the files, now they're going to have them all locally on their PC, right? So there's a lot of use cases where if you have people that are working from, many different devices, or maybe sometimes they're working from a personal device, you might actually want to turn those off and say, hey, it's fine if you work on these from a personal device. You just can't set up a, regular sync of every single file that you have permission for, basically pulling down to that device. The other little option here is if you do or do not want to allow them to access things through the mobile application. Again, it's just another security setting. They could forget their phone somewhere, and now your price list or P&L or something really private could be floating around out there. The other thing you can do here is actually see any of their connected devices. So if you looked in, you saw a particular user that had, 10 or 15 different devices connected, you might go, well, that's weird. We're going to go ahead and disconnect all of those. And as they need them, they can just re-log in on that particular device. So a good way to do a little bit of spring cleaning. If you've kind of switched anyone's phones or computers, you might want to go ahead and reset that. Next here, we'll go through just some of these kind of basic settings. So under the profile, we can give things a team name and define who's going to be our super admin. Nice thing about WorkDrive, as Zoho users know, sometimes it's very easy to change a super admin. Sometimes it's very hard. Within WorkDrive, we can just do it from right here. We don't have to get really any extra steps as long as you are already logged in as that super admin. In terms of branding, it's exactly what you'd expect. You can go ahead and upload a logo here. Of course, they're going to include some of their standard best practices, file size and dimensions. That's just going to apply itself, anywhere that the WorkDrive logo would be showing up. I do want to highlight this also applies for external folders. So if I had given a client an external share link, if I don't have branding, up in the top left, it'll show the WorkDrive logo. If you change it out here, it will show your logo instead. So a nice way to just keep things really consistent so that if they log in, it just as everything is branded to your specific company. A couple extra settings here around content that we'll go through kind of quickly. As Brett mentioned earlier, you can determine if you want all files to get automatically converted over to their Zoho equivalent when you upload them. So you can say, I want that to apply for the entire organization. You can also say that you want to allow team folder admins to choose that if they so please. And also you can let users do that for their own personal folders. Again, this is kind of just a little choice thing. You know, if you've got some really crazy intense spreadsheet in Excel and it calls very particular formulas that might not be in Sheet, you don't want to have this on. But if, you know, your kind of use case in this is pretty standard, then it can be kind of a nice feature to have.
And we don't really cover it on this. We're covering just WorkDrive itself. We've never done something on Sheet and Writer and Show, but man, it's those applications are fantastic. I mean, I think that they do. I mean, I would say they're as good or better than in every single case than the Google Suite. And you know, when you look at the Microsoft stuff, most of those are desktop, but I mean, they do a nice job of conversion. I should say that. And I think you pointed out that one exception, which is you can always go crazy on an Excel spreadsheet and have, you know, that it's never going to convert, but that means it's never going to convert anywhere. So, but they do a nice job with those. So that's another thing to think of when you're looking at this. You know, a lot of times when you're using WorkDrive, you're making that decision also to switch over to the Zoho Office Suite. And you really are fine if you choose to do that. Now, if you're not doing it, then like you said, Tyler, leave this off. Don't convert anything.
And there's one other little setting that I forgot to mention in here down here at the bottom. You can choose whether or not you want to use the drafts functionality inside of WorkDrive. This is just important to know about because when you save something for the first time, it's going to default to draft if you have this on, which would mean other people can't see it. Even if Brett and I are both an admin of the same folder, if I create a document and I don't publish it from draft, he's not going to find it. I mentioned that because I did that not too long ago. And I said, I guarantee you the file's there. And it wasn't because I had left it in draft. So I like to highlight that's where that is. If you want to turn that off and just make it so you don't need to publish things for them to be publicly visible, you can do that here. Next here, we'll jump into roles and permissions. You know, a couple quick settings. Who should be allowed to create a team folder, whether it's public or private? Should people with the same domain just be able to automatically join your team? That is really only going to work if you're not using Zoho One. If you are in Zoho One, they're going to need a license there and permissions there anyways. And then down here at the bottom of this page, I just like to highlight this. It gives you a breakdown of what all of their different terms mean, which I really appreciate because sometimes, and whether it's a Zoho app or a different app, you know, they'll give a name like organizer and it's like, great, what does that mean? What exactly can that person do? So here they give you every single specific thing that someone can do in a folder or to a document based on what kind of role they have. So you'll see, of course, things like delete are going to be, you know, saved for the highest level admin permissions. Couple settings around sharing here, right? So should you be able to make an external share link, you know, and that can of course be set up for particular folders, or you could just say everything we're going to have in WorkDrive is internal. So no one should be able to make an external link, and that's totally fair game. You know, again, should we be able to download or print out things that have been embedded, right? So that's like if I have an iframe or if I have something embedded on my site, should there be a little button somewhere in the top right to allow someone to download? And lastly, like Brett showed you earlier, should we be able to create those collection requests, or, you know, is this just going to be an internal system and we want everything to go through one of our users?
Yeah, it's important to note, if you want to go back there a little bit, but the allow, download, and print for embedded, if this is turned off, you don't get the option, because you also get this option individually. Every one of these things shows up as an option when you're doing sharing, but once these are turned off, they don't show up as options. So oftentimes you know, people get confused about that. It's like, hey, I thought I could share this. You could, but it got turned off globally. And so that's not giving you that ability. So this is somewhere where you need to go off and take a look.
Yeah, that's good to highlight. That, you know, a lot of these permissions, like you're saying, are first set up globally, then set up per team folder, and then set up per external link. So you get a lot of different opportunities to choose these. I'm showing them here from a global perspective, but, you know, it gets a lot more granular than that. Next here, of course, you're able to assign a custom domain. You know, maybe you would want to create some different naming convention, you know, files.zenatta.com or workdrive.zenatta.com, something like that. The cool thing about this, it's also going to show up for your external links. So again, if you're using things to share with clients, kind of a good idea to make sure that things stay one branded experience. Next here, again, this is a similar setup that you had under the specific users and devices. This is basically a global way to say if anyone should be able to use the desktop or mobile apps where things are actually going to be stored locally. Quick one here around data retention. Do I ever want to delete things that go into trash? One important distinction inside of WorkDrive is that only an admin can fully delete something. Anyone else can just move it to trash. And you can choose what that retention policy is going to be like. And maybe in this case, I never want to delete items in trash automatically. Maybe I'm only going to do that as an admin once a month. I'm going to clear out my whole trash can, but nothing's going to go automatically. So a couple little choices you can make around that. And a good segue, of course, if you're keeping things in trash, it is going to create a little bit more of a storage issue. Here, you're kind of just able to say, should there be a limit inside of my folders? Again, these are different than team folders, right? Brett and I might be working together in a team folder, but I might have my own private folder where I'm just storing a whole bunch of high-res images. And so maybe you'd want to say, hey, we've only got a couple terabytes to work with here. We need to set some kind of cap on the personal storage inside of WorkDrive. Lastly, they do have a full migration suite for G Suite, Dropbox, and OneDrive. As you'd expect, depending on how exactly you want things to look, this might work perfect or this might need some adjustment. It's basically going to pull everything into its own team folder, and then within that, keep any of your folder hierarchy. So it's a good way to get everything in, and then maybe you would want to do a little bit of reorganization once you've got it, but then you would just be doing all that from within WorkDrive and not having to hit any crazy APIs or do something too intense just to get your files over. And with that here, I want to show one more little thing that I consider an admin setting, but it just technically doesn't live inside of the admin panel. So up in the very top right, if you click on your own little icon, in this case, it's the Zenatta logo, and we go under team details and under groups, this is where we can set up specific user groups. Now, if you're on Zoho One, it's going to pull these from, I believe, Zoho Click or People. They're kind of consolidated group management behind the scenes, or you can pull this and create your own. I'll explain it now and I'll show it to you a little bit later. Groups make things a lot easier because you can share a team folder with a group and then know that anytime that you add a new person to the marketing group, they now have access to all these specific team folders, and you don't have to go one by one by one and add someone everywhere that they need to be. So maybe I want to create just an administrative group here who should be added to a whole bunch of things, and I want to add someone there as a member of that group. Again, just with the idea that I'm going to add these set of people to a whole bunch of stuff, and I don't want to do it one by one, and I don't want to adjust it when I hire new people. I just want to put them in a group and be done with it. So it's just going to save you some time to do things that way. And now that we've kind of covered the admin panel, we're going to jump into team folders. So team folders are kind of like your individual little buckets where people are going to work and host their files. It's where you're going to control a lot of your access settings. So they're pretty important. So from our homepage, like I mentioned earlier, there's all roads lead to team folders. So there's a lot of different ways to create them here. Like Brett is mentioning, if I just go ahead and click on team folders from the homepage, I can actually pull up an interface to create one from here. I can also go to the admin panel where we were earlier and create one directly from inside the admin panel. It's identical either way. It's going to bring you through the exact same interface. They just like to put that everywhere because you're going to see them everywhere. Once we actually go to create a team folder, of course, we're going to give it a name. So maybe we want to store some of our client contracts in a folder here that's going to be relatively locked down. Because it's going to be pretty important to keep this information private, we're going to want to make this a private team folder. That basically just means you have to be added first. So an example is I've got a team folder in our own Zenatta one that's just for everybody. It has things like our, little funny Zoom backgrounds and, some general flow charts of Zoho apps that are just useful to have. But then I also have other ones that store some of our, employee contracts and things like that. So there are some use cases where you might just say, let them eat cake, right? Anybody can come in here and see this folder. But a lot of the times you're going to want to have things be a little bit more private. Last but not least, you can give things a description as you'd expect. So I'll just give this one a quick one so that we remember exactly what it's used for. Now we're kind of at the point where we're going to add some users. So maybe I want to go ahead and add Ben Otta here as a user. I can then choose from those set of permissions, right? So anything from you've got everything you would need down to you're only allowed to view documents in here. Maybe in this case, I want to make Ben just a commenter, right? So you can view and leave comments, but you shouldn't be able to edit anything inside of our client contracts. So now that person has been added here, it's going to go ahead and drop us into the kind of quick overview of the team folder. Again, we haven't really done much with it yet, so there's not a lot to see here. But maybe we want to go ahead and take a look at all of them. Now we've got it in our list. It's been created. We're tracking how much storage we have in it. Let's say here, though, we realize, I actually forgot to add someone. From this view, I can come in and manage our members, and I want to go ahead and add some more. And now we can add from our group. So the beauty of this is if we hire some more administrative help, we just put them in that group, and now they're automatically going to have this set of permissions in this folder. So again, WorkDrive is definitely one of those applications where you can go really quick and set everything up. But if you take the time to think through, what are the different levels of permissions we're going to have? What are the different folders we might need? What are the different user groups that are going to be accessing these different folders? You can save yourself a whole lot of ongoing management if you've kind of planned some of this stuff out first. Additionally, from here, like Brett showed on a document, you can see activity across the entire folder as well. So if you're seeing some weird stuff happen, hey, I would have sworn we had one of these documents in here. Where did that go? You might see, oh, someone put it in a different little subfolder. Great, now I know where it is. Within here as well, you can kind of filter these down. You'll find if you have a lot of people working in a team folder, you're going to see a lot of stuff that is a-okay, edited a file, left a comment, did this, that, and the other. But you might want to check in on sharing, trashing, deleting, moving, and things like that that can be more disruptive. So now that we've actually created our team folder, we've got it over here on the left-hand side. Up at the top, we have some additional management options that we can do. So under this team folder details, it can be a little bit misleading, though each of these is their own little tab. They actually all bring you to the same place. They just start at a different point. So our team folder details, how much storage do we have? Who are all of our different members? What's the description? Pretty basic info there. Members, we already talked about, so I'm skipping that. If you go to that members tab, it looks exactly like it just did where we were before here. Settings here, if you wanted to change things, make it public, you could do that. If you want to allow uploads via email, you can go ahead and turn that on. It's going to give you a big old programmatic email address that you can forward to with an attachment. It's going to add it to the folder. Here you could say, what, we actually want to kill the ability to share externally. We want to disallow people from downloading. And then down at the bottom there, you've got that setting for a specific folder where I might say, I want all of our folders to be people who have, or I want all of our documents to be automatically converted to Zoho WorkDrive. Quick question from Sean that I'll cover now, just to make sure it's clear. Team members are people who have to have a Zoho license. That is correct. So if someone's going to be added as a team member, they would either need to have a WorkDrive license if you have it as a standalone, or they would need to have the relevant bundle license like Zoho One, Remotely, or Workplace in order to add them through this interface. Down here at the very bottom, last little thing, if you do need to delete it, it's kind of tucked under the fold. I always forget where that is, so I like to highlight it. It's just all the way down at the bottom of the settings. Trash and activity, they're pretty self-explanatory. So if you do have any folders that are in the trash or any files that are in the trash, you can restore them from there. Activity, we've already covered. One thing I do want to highlight here, because I've actually had this come up when implementing this application, is that you can manage all of your different external links separately from this folder. So an example is you might have an external share link that goes out to maybe just someone who is at your company, but not a user of WorkDrive. But you also might have one in the case of client contracts that goes out to your legal consultants, right? Maybe you just want them to have the ability to upload and view some files in here. But let's say that you have a bad experience with the people that are managing your legal services now, and you want to disable just their link. You don't want to go through and remake every single bit here and have to move all the files. Through this external sharing interface, we can actually just go ahead and get rid of that link. right? So we can copy it, we can view who's been using it, we can change any of its settings, and we can delete it all just from within that interface. So nice to have that, because generally speaking, things change, and people who had access in the past might need to not have that access anymore in the future. Lastly here, not lastly, but within a specific team folder, of course, you can create any files. You can create subfolders within this, right? So you can think about each of these as basically its own little world with its own file structure and formatting. You can create any documents from here as you would expect, as well as upload files, folders, or pull from another cloud system. One little thing as well that you can do here that can be very useful is when you're in an actual team folder, you can search within that team folder all just through one interface. So if I was in my client contracts and I knew, oh, you know what, there's going to be a contract in here for Zenatta somewhere, but it might be in any of these specific little places, you can just come in here and search directly through, and it's only going to show you relevant documents from that particular team folder. And with that, now that we've kind of walked through the basic use cases for the folders themselves, Brett, I'll pass it back to you to walk through actually setting up some of those sharing rules and links.
All right, thank you. So we'll talk about sharing documents here. As always, there are so many different ways to get to share documents. You can do it from within the document itself. You can usually do it from whatever folder you're on. We're just going to talk about the little share button here. One way to get it, again, you can add members or create a new external share link. Sean, I think this kind of goes to what you're talking about, a member being internal and external share link going out. We'll kind of see how those line up here. Or if you go into the document itself, you'll also get a nice little share button up at the top, which allows you a few more options here. You can publish it, check in, check out, but the sharing is the main link. Whether you're doing it from in the document or you're doing it from the main page, it is exactly the same thing that you're looking at. So this is your general share menu here, if you will. And it's talking about the ones that are set up. So we've already got, members of sales collateral in the team folder. You've got a permalink. You can change the visibility on that. You've got embed code. First off, I want to talk about something that I think Zoho does that's different than anything else I've seen. So most of the time when you're sharing documents, at least I find with Google, OneDrive, whatever, you basically can edit, view, comment, or just view. Zoho has this one called share, which means you can share, edit, and comment. It's something I don't know. Maybe I've seen it in others. I just don't. So you have share, which is the highest level you can have. And I think that confuses people sometimes because it's almost, it doesn't seem like it should be. It should be more like admin, but it allows you pretty much to do everything. Edit is what it is. And then you just got the standard view and comment and view only. So when you are setting up your share privileges, you've got the 4 to choose from, not just the 3 that you normally see. So I've set up for Tyler Colt here. We've got him at view only. And now you've got the 2 members in the sales collateral team folder. Again, fairly straightforward. And if you click into that, it'll show you who's there, what the team's there, what they can do, what their abilities are. You can easily click in and see what's happening on that share level. On the permalink, you can go ahead and create a permalink. You can go ahead and just click on it and go ahead and copy that link, or you can go ahead and change the visibility of that link. And you can say who actually has access to this permalink. You can say, is it just, team folder members and shared collaborators? So you basically can really kind of hone down what these people can do. Anyone that's a member of it, anyone on the internet, which makes the entire thing wide open. Basically, you get that link. So you're able to have those permalink settings. You can dial those in fairly tightly. And then lastly is the embed code. And we talked about that earlier. And by copy, you can copy the embed code. And the only action you can do from this is to go ahead and delete the embed code. So if you have an active embed code that's out there, this is just another way to get to it, to go ahead and make some changes to it, delete it. Anyway, everything could be accessed from here. The one that I find a lot of people use the most is the new external share link, which it's kind of odd. It's not really, it's to create one. It seems like there should be a bigger button for this or something. And I get asked questions like, how do I create a link? It's right there. So once you go ahead and create the new external share link, this is where most people are going to use it if you're not using it internally. And this is because all of those options were turned on the admin side, as Tyler did, you now have all of the options to either turn them on or turn them off here, setting expirations, password, requesting user data, those kind of things as well. So again, when you're sharing externally, you don't have that share setting. You only now have edit, view and comment and view, because this is an external link. Internal links where you kind of can actually share. So you really can't share something with someone externally and allow them to reshare it. Only with team members can you do that. So it's an important distinction as you go through and look at this. And that is really all there is to sharing. And Tyler, do you want to add anything?
I guess I'll highlight for anyone in the listening base here who might be more on the development side of things. These external share links can also be created via API. So we'll talk in a moment here about some of the kind of advanced use cases for WorkDrive. But this exact thing, should they be able to view, can they download, create a password for it? All of that can actually be done through custom functions and the API as well. So when you do have those use cases where someone signs an NDA and now we want to give them a link with a password to some documentation that they're not allowed to download, that can all just be automated through that same kind of interface.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little about some of those advanced features right now and some of
the things we do. This list here is by no means exhaustive, but we like to highlight these mainly because these are ones that we find ourselves implementing for almost anybody who's sending contracts through the CRM at this point. So first of all, you can automatically generate client-specific folders when either just on the creation of a record or when they hit a certain threshold. So in some cases, you might say, every single account in here should just get a folder the minute that they're created. Or you might say, I don't actually need one of those until a deal hits a certain stage. I actually see one of our listeners here who we built that exact thing for, right? Where we don't want to clutter up WorkDrive with every single account that might come through. But if they hit the deal stage for document collection, well, now we're definitely ready to go ahead and create a place for those documents to live. You can also go ahead and automate proposal generation and actually saving those proposals into client folders. This one can be a huge quality of life improvement if you are using the CRM mail merge now. Kind of twofold. This does require creating the proposal itself through Deluge. So there's kind of a prerequisite step if we want to have it saved to the right place. But using that, you can basically create a button, maybe on a deal record that says create proposal. So you click that button, it pulls in all of your data, merges it into that record, and then actually will upload the completed mail merge document to WorkDrive. And even if you'd like, bring back a link to that specific document and place it in the record. That's actually how we send our proposals. We fill out a whole big deal page. What apps are we going to use? What are the first action items? Then we press the magic button and it opens up for us in WorkDrive and we can send it from there. Last little thing here, not the last one, but once, let's say we take this to the next step. So I create that proposal, it lives in WorkDrive, and then I go ahead and send it for signature through there. Once that is completed, you can actually pull the completed Zoho sign version all the way over to that specific customer's WorkDrive folder, all automatically. And so there's kind of the story here really is just that having your file management tool directly integrated to your CRM can be great if you do manage a lot of documents that are client specific, because you can just automate a lot of these different steps. Last little thing here is that you can actually capture document submissions if you have people routing them through Zoho Forms. We find that pretty often, like Brett was showing you, you can absolutely do this with like a collections page and kind of manage it that way. Sometimes though, you just want to create a nice external form. Maybe you're collecting a big set of form data as well as maybe a resume and a CV. If you twist this and maybe do it in some type of, applicant tracking, or maybe you need some insurance paperwork or tax exemptions, right? You can actually, with a little bit of custom code, take those Zoho Forms entries, and as long as you have something to relate them to a contact, like an email address, you can actually move all of those to WorkDrive automatically as well. So there's just a whole bunch of different use cases here around using WorkDrive, especially because they do have that full API that we can access.
And I think so important to point out here, Tyler, as we look at this, is that we're oftentimes talking to clients about, hey, what's your return on investment going to be? How much time is this automation going to save you? And these are just, man, these are big, big automations. They don't take that long to set up, and they just save hours and hours and hours and hours of time. I mean, just what you laid out here, 90% of this, I think, almost 100% of it is internal stuff we do. We've done it for a ton of clients as well, but just automating the entire proposal creation, dropping it into WorkDrive, automating the fact that when they sign the document, you progress the deal, you take the PDFs, you automatically drop them into WorkDrive, you automatically generate the shared WorkDrive folder for the client with that collections ability, and that link automatically gets added into their account and automatically gets sent to them so they have access. I mean, all of these kind of things that maybe would take 10, 15 minutes, because there's invoice generation, there's everything, it's all automated. But I mean, maybe it takes 10, 15, 20 minutes a client. Maybe there's a chance for you to mess up because you're doing it manually. There's all of these things. And it just doesn't take that long to set up, and the ability, through Delusion, some scripts to make all of this stuff happen internally. And you just can't really do it that well with Google Drive. I mean, it's just not as elegant, right? Or with OneDrive or whatever, because you're just talking Zoho to Zoho here. So just so much you can do. All right.
Yeah, and a couple questions here.
Do we have, nope, same thing. Let's go into some Q&A. We've got some here. Before we get to the ones that are here, I actually got an email from Jeff this morning that says, I'm not going to be able to attend the webinar, but I wanted to get these questions in there. So the first one, Tyler, we talked about a little earlier. This is integrating WorkDrive with Zoho CRM. There's a marketplace extension that will integrate it. You can turn that integration on. Basically, I'm not quite sure what he's asking here. He's got the WorkDrive folder ID. He's got the WorkDrive folder URL, but he's not sure what to do next. That's kind of the extent of the overall integration when you turn it on.
Yeah, if you're using the marketplace plugin, which is actually very good, it does a lot of what you'll need to do these automations that we were just talking about. The main thing I want to highlight for you, Jeff, is if you have the WorkDrive integration activated for the leads module, a really important thing to do is go into the lead conversion mapping and make sure that you've mapped the WorkDrive folder ID and WorkDrive folder URL to the contact, account, and deal. The reason is, if you don't do that with the default plugin, once you convert it, it's going to generate a new folder because it's not going to see that it already has one. So it's just one little thing I want to highlight with using that. Now that you have that folder ID and URL, just make sure that they're mapped over to the rest of the records so that if you uploaded a folder there or a file there while they were a lead, it'll still be there waiting for you when you open up the deal.
Yep. And then he asks, WorkDrive desktop sync, is it possible to sync to an external hard drive? Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I've got a 8 terabyte SSD that sits on my desktop that has a 100% copy of everything that lives in our WorkDrive folder. Now, you can't actually, for most people, you're not going to want to do that. You're going to want to turn on selective syncing or no syncing at all, where you basically just have full visibility to it from your desktop. But you absolutely can do that and have a full external sync. And with that, we have got a lot of questions, Tyler. So let's get back.
Yeah, we can get through some of these.
I think we got the first one. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we got the first two there. So we have a question from Kevin. Is it possible to populate a CRM record with a WorkDrive link after a form submission? Yes, as long as you have something in that form that ties it to that record. So if you had like an email address that you're capturing in the form so that you could find the contact and maybe update a field to trigger a workflow or use some type of automation that now you know that form has been submitted, you can go ahead and create that folder link, pull it back down, and even if you wanted to, move the files over to that new location. I'll kind of do this as part two because Kevin provided a little more context at the bottom here. It's like a scenario would be like a client submits a form with a video attached. You don't want to load up the CRM with any heavy video files because though you have CRM storage, it's not really a great price. It's not made for holding videos, high res video, audio, or images. In that case, Kevin, we did something not long ago that you might want to do there is if you were capturing those with a Zoho form, you can actually push the form to like its own module. So we created like a forms entries module. the minute that something hits that form entries module, it will search for the proper thing, whether it's a contact, account, whatever you have in the form data that allows you to find something. It'll make sure that it's got a WorkDrive link. If it doesn't, it'll create one, and then it'll move those attachments to that WorkDrive link. The big thing there that kind of saves you is that you can then set up that module to auto delete later, right? So that you're not actually storing all of those. Now, I will say the one limitation there that you need to be aware of is Deluge's limitation on file size, which is different in different applications. For something like that, you almost might need to kick it over to Creator. So it gets a little more complicated if you have large files, just because the CRM limit inside of Deluge is a little lower. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll take Sean. Sean asked, the new contract app in Zoho, do you see limitations of what you're doing here on this slide, which he was referring to our customization slide where we were talking about some of the advanced features. Sean, not really. The contracts app is very, very nice. But you can pretty much do the same things with it. I think at the end of the day, it's only integrated with Zoho Sign at this point in time. So, you're sending out a contract, it's coming back in with Sign. You're going to handle all that same kind of file management. Right now, it is very contracty. It is, you cannot, the contracts are contracts. And basically the clauses you're going to put in, everything is text-based, everything is boilerplate. That you're going to put in there. And it's a very nice application. I see it only for big law firms and things like that, but I think they already have a lot of their own contract management. We've looked at a lot. I think that for almost every client we've talked to and everything we've done, just using standard writer templates and automations around that accomplishes, pretty much that 99%. There's very few people needing the contracts, but you'd have to look at the limitations there. But right now there really aren't any downsides to it.
Mm-hmm. Let me see here. Peter asked, is it workflow driven or is it in Zoho Creator? Generally speaking, most of what we talked about there, kind of grabbing your proposal, dropping it into the WorkDrive folder, creating the link and storing it on the record. Generally speaking, all of that's just driven through CRM workflows and Deluge. You can do some of that with Flow, kind of go and create a link and pull it back, but on our side, if we can do it in Deluge rather than Flow, we always will. So we'll generally do it that way. The only time that you might need to set up Creator as some type of intermediate is if the files are really big. Again, just given that the CRM's file size, I think you can only take like a 5 or 10 megabyte file at a time when you're working with it in a Deluge function. So there are some use cases that you'll actually run some stuff through Creator, but generally speaking, for things like a proposal that aren't going to be that big, everything just kind of runs through CRM custom functions.
And Scott asks, do you have webinars specifically on how to do these automations with any applicable Deluge code, or do we need to hire you guys to do them? We don't have any demos on how to do it because every single one we do seems to be so specific to a use case. We can make some basic demos. We've talked about doing it. Unfortunately or fortunately, Scott, at the moment, you'd probably need to retain us to do them or to get through them because everybody's different in what they need to have done.
We had a question here. How about some limitations of WorkDrive? That's a good question. As you'd expect, there's an upper limit for the default storage you get out of the box. I believe on Zoho One, it's about 2 terabytes. Of course, you'd be able to add more. As of right now, other limitations. There will eventually be like an API credit or file size limitation, though there currently isn't, but I would anticipate that will come around at some point where some things might have to be run on a schedule. Yeah, it's kind of wild west
crazy.
In terms of the API. Any other big limitations you can think of, Brett? I mean, in terms of like your day-to-day file management, it's going to be, and actually Scott's correcting me here, Zoho One is 5 terabytes, not 2. Thank you, Scott. So yeah, I think there aren't really any big gotchas in terms of like your file management needs. The place where you might have limitations is, let's say something like OneDrive or Dropbox might have an integration with a particular like design tool that you like to use, right? Sometimes there's some of those like network effect things that can affect it because WorkDrive isn't quite as widespread. You might not be able to work with it that way. though I would say you could probably still do it with a true sync and then kind of work with from your desktop. So there are some limitations. I would think most of them are going to be, what does it integrate to outside of the world of Zoho, right? Where if you're a Microsoft house and use Microsoft Teams and use SharePoint, you might find some reason to be on OneDrive, right? Because there's just going to be some of these things that are just pre-baked and just work right out of the box. But if you are a Zoho house and you're moving more and more that way, I think you'll find there aren't too many real significant limitations.
Yep. Osama asks, files uploaded to WorkDrive from CRM, can they be displayed as related list? Yes. Basically, you get a little WorkDrive on the side, you click on it, it opens up a related list of all the files that you have for that particular client. Mona wants to know what CRMs are integratable to Zoho. It depends. There are a lot. If you are not using Zoho CRM, which technically, Mona, is the foundation pretty much of everything. I don't know if you go to marketplace.zoho.com and you want to search for WorkDrive integration, you probably will tell you which ones people have built integrations for.
Yeah.
I think there's one for Salesforce. I don't know. I think, yeah, there's a few of them that they build integrations for. Quite honestly, though, it's usually the other way around. People are starting on Zoho and going to these as well.
Yeah, and I will say, like, if you have a development team that's on a different CRM and they're savvy with REST API, then anything is integratable with WorkDrive, as long as it can send and receive JSON data to endpoints. Yeah, but in terms of the default integrations, you'd want to check what you'd probably want to do is check like the marketplace in that CRM. So if you were on Salesforce, you'd want to check their app store first. And if not, maybe check the Zoho side to see if there's one that's built from WorkDrive.
Yeah. And honestly, most of the integrations of outside applications are to the CRM. It's not really much the other way around. All right, last question here. Can you send a list of docs to your clients and ask them to upload them on the link so that they are saved into each related buckets? Absolutely.
Yep. It's actually a common thing that you do is, let's say you've got a deal in the CRM and the deal goes to closed one, right? You want to automatically create that external link and send it out in an email, right? That kind of guides them on what they're going to need to upload.
All right, guys, thank you so much. We really appreciate you joining us today. If you have any questions or comments, head over to zenatta.com and drop us a line. And if you go to zenatta.com/Zen, you can check out our CRM Zen show. If you've never watched it before, every single Friday morning at 10 a.m., Tyler and I cover all the news that happens in the world of Zoho. And then that gets published on Monday as our newsletter and everything, but check that out as well.
And as well, of course, we've got all of our different links here for various social media platforms. Please give us a follow there if you want to stay in the loop with any other content that we create. We always try to post those there so people can see it. Of course, we'd love if you would subscribe to us on YouTube, where we post the recordings of all of our webinars, as well as a variety of tips and tricks and training videos. And of course, subscribe to our newsletter, where we roll up all of the news in the world of Zoho every single week.
We've got a webinar tomorrow. Go to zenatta.com/events. We're doing one with the Zoho team on Zoho Books and Analytics, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.